So have you gotten a little bit of rest out from the session, or you just always working, I think?
Well, it's nonstop, but every moment is a blessing.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm able to do what I can.
We're doing so. I'm very much, looking forward to hearing. I know a lot of things got done.
Yes, it was very successful. I feel we did a lot of stuff with the amount of time. We have really shown results. I'm very happy to report, and I'll share a number of things with you shortly too.
Okay. And now we're going to be joined by Representative Steinberg. Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
How are you, Doug?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Good.
Why don't we start with Saud? Tell us a little bit about your view of what happened, what you liked that got done, things that maybe you were hoping to get past that didn't, and also what can we start thinking about towards next year to start supporting?
Sure. I can, because both Jonathan and I can collaborate on this. And the reason I say that is that we both have a bias that I think the Public Health Committee did some of the most important work, which is going to be transformational for the next many, many years. And everybody is going to look back in 2022 and say that this was the year good things happened. Mental health for children and adults have been front and center in this particular session. And we had 3 big bills, and a number of legislators had been part of it. But Public Health Committee was the center part of this effort, along with the Kids Committee. So we had 3 bills: Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 2, and 5001. Which looked at a comprehensive strategy of how to take care of the children's behavioral health needs. 2 of those bills, Senate Bill 1 and Senate Bill 2, were more preventive aspect, which were looking at how can we create systems so that the risk of mental health challenges that our children would have would decrease. With the Senate Bill 1 focused on what can we do in the school systems to strengthen a support system, but also provide first sites for education for our children with the child care educators and child care centers to have enough support so that we can continue to have some of the best care providers to our children and educators to have a sustainable financial interest, and also continue to save the industry which was dying because of COVID. So that was Senate Bill 1 in the broader sense. Senate Bill 2 was also looking at how to have sustainability within the industry by creating systems, by looking at how we can provide best healthcare to the child care educators, but also providing systems and support in various areas where there were holes. The 5001 was something that Jonathan and some of our other House colleagues had been working since November of last year, when we heard about the challenges of the children. So I will give that part to Jonathan because he has lived and breathed this for the past 6+ months.
Well, we can play tag team here, which I think is maybe very effective. It's hard to really state how consequential the combined legislation of House Bill 5001 and Senate Bill 2 with the addition of Senate Bill 1 were. And the question becomes, why were we able to do this year? There are 2 reasons. One is clearly the pandemic exposed many of the flaws in our healthcare safety net that are the result of over a decade of cuts and failure to reimburse providers for the care they provide, and a recognition that the workforce is insufficient, particularly when it comes to mental health. The other big factor was having money, and I cannot state enough how important it was to actually have these federal funds that have allowed us to fund programs we haven't in some time, start some pilots and experiments that we hope to prove out before the federal funds run out, such that we can make them permanently part of the budget, but also so that we can take care of things that are accessory to the mental health issues that we seem to face every year: the opioids epidemic, suicide prevention, things that we talk about every year in public health, along with workforce issues and mental health issues. But we were finally, and at least temporarily, in a position to do something about them. So there's significant money on the table between these 2 bills, depending on how you add it up, in excess of $60 million. And I could argue that that is just dipping our toe in the water, given what the need is. But it is sorely needed. It will allow us to do some good things and prove out these things should be scaled up in the next couple of years. So what we did with children's mental health, it really applies to some degree to adult mental health as well, particularly when it comes to trying to incentivize mental health providers to come to Connecticut and stay in Connecticut. Some of the things we put in place are going to take some years to bear fruit, but ultimately, hopefully, we will have more people here in the state and we can address our really serious access issues in a way that we haven't before. But I don't want to underestimate how Senate Bills 1 and 2 really focused on kids. And that, if I can segue with Saud's permission, to one of the other bills he and I are very proud of, which was applying some federal money to deal with the issue of lead poisoning in the state of Connecticut. We know that there's still lead paint in homes and there's lead pipes in places. We put some money on the table to start addressing this problem so that our kids won't have developmental issues growing up, because we know how susceptible young people are to lead poisoning. So that's a critical start from the infrastructure standpoint. There's also a bill that we talked about, ended up being an education bill, to make money available for HVAC systems in schools, because we know that there's an air quality problem in schools across the state. So it's things like this that we talked about year after year, but we got done this year, first of all, because Saud and I were absolute taskmasters and forced our committee through 80 plus hours of public hearings, but because we had the money to actually execute them. And it makes me very proud to say that we got these substantial things done this session.
Great. Is there a state that is doing this better, that is a model that you guys were looking at, or is everybody struggling and you guys were kind of creating new things as you went along?
We certainly looked at other states, but every state is dealing with the issues we have. Mental health coming out of the pandemic, suicides are up because of the pandemic. There's still substance use disorders all over the place. I think we're all struggling to find answers, but we always look at other states to see what they're doing as well.
I think, of course, like I said, we have a bias, but we got so much done. And these were all the things that we have been struggling with for the past many years. We say, well, if we had the money, if we had the resources, we should fix this. We should. And this was the year we were able to do many of those things. And because our enemy was time, getting it done required us to do all sorts of things, begging, crawling, crying, but we got things done through various means and recognize some areas. I'm going to touch on a few ones. We worked on the tobacco settlement. The money was not being used for tobacco cessation, so we were able to appropriate some of that funding over. And the opioid settlement was another thing that was very critical. We wanted to make sure that that money is protected and used in a manner to take care of this opioid epidemic, which continues to haunt everyone in our state. And then opioid bill, like Jonathan was mentioning, is so critical to continue to gain more ground in access and prevention. One of the parts of the opioid bill which was important was that 86% of all deaths, the unintentional deaths from opioid, have been related to fentanyl. So we've made the fentanyl strips easily available. So if, God forbid, somebody is interested to take anything, they would actually be able to test and know if fentanyl is in that chemical that they're trying to get. And that would actually take them away from it and hopefully save their lives. So little things which are going to have very significant benefits going forward.
I've got a question in the chat from Janet Epstein. She wants to hear concrete examples of how this legislation will help families. How much support was there from Republicans on these bills?
Well, I think the good news is that our committee works in a bipartisan manner until it doesn't. On many of the things we talked about, there was bipartisan support. There are some things that get into more core political strategies in which the committee divides, such as aid and dying, which once again we didn't get done this year. But for the most part, we have people working with similar good intentions. As far as specifics, we could go on for the next 25 minutes just talking about 5001 and SB2. I'll give you a couple of examples just to give you a sense of things, large and small. We have enabled more mobile mental health units, which is a model that's been used successfully, for example, in the New London area. This will allow us to scale it up because quick intervention in mental health crises has proven to have much better outcomes. We have got insurance companies to pay for a couple of wellness appointments where you don't even have to be diagnosed for an acute mental illness, but you can get to see a provider, assuming that we have access to them, which allows people in a less confrontational manner to, particularly for kids, to talk through what the issues are and get on the right path and see the right people. We put money in place to help pediatricians integrate their care more with specialty providers. We put money on the table to help various practitioners get their certificates or licenses so that they're on the spot and they can help, like social workers and nurses and therapists of a variety of types, with particular emphasis on high-level providers like psychiatrists and psychologists. Again, some of these things will take some time, but we want to make sure that even for a small state that there's access in a variety of places. And it's, sincerely, Saud and I could go on and on about this bill. It had 76 sections in 5001. I forgot how many was in SB2, but there was a lot of stuff in it.
How long do we have to prove this stuff out if this is all coming from, you know, federal money that was basically enacted in the last couple of years? How far out does it go?
Yeah, and some of it's ARPA funds, so that's going to peter out in 2024. Some of these things we already have a pretty good feel are going to be worthy. The problem is come 2024, when we may be looking at some deficits again, that may not be as bad as we thought it was going to be, but still because of the pension debt that we have, still $95 billion. Some of those programs will not be able to move forward unless we're able to come up with additional funds in the regular budget.
Was the bipartisan support better this year because money weren't fighting so hard for finding sources of revenue? Is that maybe why?
I think it made it easier. You know, ideology doesn't go away just because there's money.
The other thing was that the issues are so clear that it would really not be very smart of anyone, no matter which political spectrum that they are, that they would take away healthcare from children or mental health from children, or stop prevention of suicide, or not do anything on opioids. So it was not in their best interest to make such strategic mistakes as well. So I think the way we worked, and I'm new at this, and Jonathan has been doing this for much longer, but I can tell you that getting people involved early in the conversations has really been helpful. Hi, Dita.
Hey.
So that's
and to Saud's point, we consciously reached out to the Republicans early on. We thought it was the right thing to do. Not all committees operate on that basis, but we chose to do that.
Now I see a ban on flavored vape products was not passed, right? That seems like another clear thing that people should be able to get on board on, but I guess maybe not. So.
Well, that didn't die in our committee. We passed it out of committee. There was a little controversy in our committee because there are those who believe that menthol vapes are still important for people. Saud and I did not agree. We felt very strongly about it, but there was an individual in the Judiciary Committee who seems to be cozy with other interests, who attached a poison pill to the bill, which in any way, it would have maybe weakened Connecticut's law, and we weren't ready to go along with that. And I'm scratching my head to figure out what we do about that in the future.
I think that's something where we will need your help. As you mentioned, what do we do? I think the nicotine addiction in our next generation is a big threat. And right now we have some of the biggest tobacco companies in our state with the headquarters. And like insurance industry, that does not mean that they can abuse our citizens. And in the same way, the tobacco industry cannot continue to get our kids addicted to nicotine. So we need stronger policy but that would require ways that the governor's budget is going to address that in advance, so we can bypass the finance committee if we can. That is where some of our bills are dying.
Yeah, it seems like this whole vaping, industry has, I mean, we thought we were getting somewhere when we had the tobacco settlement. We thought that this would slowly fade away, and now you've got a whole new generation that's just found a different way to inject nicotine into their system.
Jonathan, you want to talk about 5414, the reproductive rights bill, which is another
Yes.
very big success?
Well, I'm glad to speak of it because I think, as usual, Saud was one of the heroes in this. This was clearly a bipartisan effort, which might surprise some people. But we had some Republicans who were definitely supportive of what we were trying to do, and the vote in both chambers actually had some measure of bipartisanship. Connecticut now has the strongest reproductive rights protections of any state in the country. That's because of the Reproductive Rights Caucus, headed by Judiciary Vice Chair Matt Blumenthal and Public Health Vice Chair Jillian Gilchrist, who quickly put together a group, and we came to conclusion very early on what we wanted to do, which was to protect people coming to our state, to be a bit of a sanctuary, and increase access for those who wanted abortion in the state to other providers beyond doctors who were actually trained and qualified to provide that care. So we accomplished that despite, as you might imagine, a very long public hearing in public health and some filibustering on the floor. But Connecticut should be very proud. It's contrasted with 26 states that seem to be going in the opposite direction. We are now a place you can come not only to be safe, to have a safe abortion, but providers and those associated with them will be protected as well. And I think that this model is now being considered by over a dozen other states in the District of Columbia, virtually word for word from what I heard from Matt Blumenthal. We are the model.
Jonathan, I just and Senator Anwar, just have a question on that. How can we let other states know that they are able to use this to come to Connecticut for safety and for service in this regard? I feel like we should be almost I don't want to say advertising, but we should be spreading the word so that people know they have options when they have nowhere else to turn in those other states that are going to possibly turn back those rights.
It's a good question. Obviously we're going to partner with Planned Parenthood and NARAL and other organizations which have presences in these other states as well. But I think you're absolutely right. I think a really good grassroots communication effort, where we can help people make those first steps, make connections, find safe havens to come to. I think we're working out some of this as we speak, but I think what you suggest is a great idea.
And then the other part of that question is, how are we preparing our healthcare system for that possible influx of folks who need the help?
Well, as I said, we've expanded access, and obviously, it's these additional practitioners, nurses, PAs, nurse midwives will have to prove that they're qualified, having the requisite training. But that will bring more people into the mix who will be available to provide that kind of care for those kind of abortions. But beyond that, I think you make a good point, which is it's not just the procedure itself, it's the support that goes around that, some of which may even be legal. And I think we have to work out some of those fine details.
Well, so and part of that mental health bill, and I don't know how that funding is distributed, but it might be something to think about, that even post, procedure, the mental health piece, which obviously a lot of it can be done through telehealth now if people do need to go back to their homes in various states. But it would be, I think, a good idea to follow these patients and offer those types of services as they're trying to recover emotionally from that whole ordeal.
I think
somebody who's got some time ought to step up and create a nice little grassroots effort to connect the dots.
One of the things in this session we have been able to do is for behavioral health, we have made telehealth permanent, which is a
Great.
very big success. But for medical and non-behavioral health, we have extended to 2024, and we have a work group that is going to look at what are the ways to be able to make it permanent, because there are insurance industry has concerns. They obviously want to look at it from their end. We want to make sure that the quality of health does not get impacted. So a combination of those will determine the rest of the care. But for behavioral health, there's enough data to support that the telehealth should be permanent, which is going to be a lifesaver.
Fantastic.
It's worrying that some of these states that are getting ready to outright ban abortion are calling it murder, and they would probably use telehealth, information to show that you had gotten an abortion, and probably use that against you if you are ever, charged. So I don't know. It's a very strange future we're looking at. I never thought we would be where we are. So.
I can touch on some of the other things which are outside of the Public Health Committee, but there may be some other parts. So we have adult sexual misconduct against children. That was from the Kids Committee. A lot of good work went into that. Liz Linehan had been working on that quite a bit. So we have been able to pass that bill, which increases the number of mandated reporters, creates awareness and preparedness from various institutions to make sure that online grooming is prevented. That was in Senate Bill 5 and House Bill 5243 were very focused on this. We have a very strong bill on data privacy, SB 6. Again, that's very relevant to what's happening with the data privacy and how some of this privacy is being used for impacting individuals. While we have the HIPAA laws, we wanted to make sure that for the social media and others, we actually have a mechanism that people will be able to have an opt-out from any of their data being used in any shape or form. So that's going to get implemented. It's going to be something big. Colorado had a bill around this, and we've sort of mirrored that kind of a bill in our state, made it a little bit better. There's another bill on Clean Air Act, which is exciting. It has so SB 4 was a bill that's the scary thing is that 6% of the vehicles on our roads, the medium and heavy size trucks, they actually account for about 50% of the pollution. And that's accounting for a significant component of our inner city asthma. So we have a new rules on emission standards, which is going to truly change our state and bring us in a far better level. It's mirrored after California law. It's a good law, and so proud that we are moving in that direction. It is going to have long-term impact on our state and in the future. There's again laws of planting trees. If a DEEP is going to cut trees for one reason or the other, they will actually have to go through a process to make sure that we are fulfilling any tree that is cut to go through a process, and we're not cutting down too many of your trees. Even though we are very fortunate to have enough trees, but we are planning 100-year strategy that we can't cut more and more trees and then expect our environment to stay well. I think there's one issue that's going to come and you will be asked about, which is about juvenile justice. That has been, again, the single issue that the Republicans are running on. They have sort of created a mindset that everything is on fire. The world is falling apart because of the police accountability bill. The data does not support that the police accountability bill is causing some of the things that we had seen, because the Police Accountability Act is not even implemented at this time. And that was the issue that people have used, because it's not implemented. How can you say that's the cause of it? Except what had happened was in the pandemic, when we were shut down, all the support systems, all the therapies that were there, the diversion programs were shut down. That resulted in an increase. We are still far better than the rest of the country in many respects, but we did have an uptick. And then just because there's an uptick, we have to take an ownership and take a responsibility for that. But the solution that many of our colleagues across the aisle were suggesting, to put our brown and black children into prisons, is not the solution. That's a failed policy. We have overcome that policy, and we have been able to address this. So the diversion programs are able to help out. So we've been able to put money into the youth services bureaus, which is going to be helpful. The car crimes that were happening were mainly for the catalytic converters. So we have a bill 256, which basically does make it very difficult for anybody to sell catalytic converters. And that actually is going to reduce the demand and then create mechanisms to prevent it. And also there was a compromise bill in collaboration with the Republicans and the Democrats, where we are looking at how the repeat offenders are going to be treated within the juveniles. That's something that is a reasonably good bill. One part was that there's going to be a tracker put on somebody who's doing it frequently. Some of the Democrats, we were concerned. I actually supported that. From my perspective, the issue was that if somebody is doing repeat crimes, they're not going to be in prison as others want, but they should be tracked so that they actually know that they cannot continue to be an offender and put our communities at threat in any shape or form. So I think in the end, it was a good compromise and a good bill that came out.
Is there a document that we can point to, or you can tell us about that talks about the rise in crime and what's the cause behind it, so that we can use that?
Yes.
In the run up.
There is a gentleman by the name of Barnes. I'll give you the name. He has done the most study, most knowledgeable on this aspect, and any of his reports from. I'll give you the name of the details in a second. But we have a lot of good data around this. While Jonathan, you want to talk about the fiscal strength of our state, because that's with all of the things that we have done, the amazing thing is that we are able to say with pride that we are the strongest fiscally that we have ever been in the history.
Yeah, I will talk about that. We alluded to the fact that the federal dollars have made a huge difference to every state in the country. It allowed us to do things we've been delaying doing or stopped doing some years ago. The other factor are the changes that were put in place when we had a bipartisan budget in 2017, which put in things like a spending cap and a volatility cap, which means that not only have we totally filled our rainy day fund, which by statute can't be more than 15% of the entire budget, that's $3.5 billion. We've taken a lot of the additional overage in revenues and applied it against our biggest problem as a state, which are pension obligations. And we have paid back several $1 billion against that, meaning that the annual impact is we have to spend more than $200 million less every year to finance that obligation, which can go towards programs that's sorely needed. So that's a long-term solution. Our ability to pay down that pension debt is the only prospect we have long-term of creating a sustainable budget in the state of Connecticut. We still have a long ways to go. We need to be doing this for another couple decades, but this is a very positive sign, which means that the really bad trajectory the state was on prior to the pandemic is at least somewhat improved. Now, a robust economy would help us even more, and creating good jobs is something we still have to talk about. But this fiscal good news, even if it is only transitory, has meant that a lot of the good things that Saud and I have talked about have become possible, whereas before they were not. I will also just talk about a couple other environment bills. For those of you who are very interested in sort of the successor to the solar program with the caps on VNM and the like, even though we're in a more of a hybrid system now, a successor to our old program, we finally, even despite the opposition of our own commissioner from DEEP, raised those caps somewhat, which will create additional activity in the solar marketplace in the state. And we should also mention SB 10, which is a combined environment, energy, transportation bill, which has put us on the same path as California for heavy truck standards and put in place a number of other things that are in and of themselves not going to move the needle that much, but are finally putting us in the right direction when it comes to many things related to energy efficiency. and the expansion of electric vehicles and infrastructure. These are small steps. We have a long ways to go. But again, in a short session, tremendous progress.
What happened with the electric vehicle bill as far as not allowing manufacturers that don't have a dealership in the state to sell here? I thought that.
Yeah, this was Will Haskell's big bill along with me. I've been pushing it for 4 years, and I can remember 214 never really had the prospects of getting called to the Senate, despite Will's good efforts. The opposition to it, a very effective effort by the dealers to muddy the waters and pressure legislators to be against it. And I will add that with each passing year, the urgency may be diminished. All the dealers are transitioning, and even though there'll be other companies that are disruptive, not just Tesla, but Rivian and others, Lucid, we will be seeing more of them out there that would prefer perhaps the option of direct sales. I think the moment may have come and gone, honestly. And I know that will disappoint some people. My energies are being invested in making sure that we can make EVs accessible to people of lower middle income, not just Tesla owners in Westport, and that we make a serious effort to get the infrastructure built out. I'll say I guess I don't own a Tesla, but I just had a level 2 EV charger installed in my garage because the state has an incentive program, a rebate program, where they're paying a percentage of my installation costs. I'd like to see that become very accessible to all income levels, and that we build out a lot more EV charging areas in schools and other places. We can facilitate Connecticut being a friendly state to travel to and to stay in if we really invested in that infrastructure.
Right.
This is Dita. Can I just brag that I got my first Volt, the 2012 very first version, and I still have it. It's a great car. It's been 10 years. Love it. Never put gas in it twice a year.
Chevy
no
Volt.
reason.
It's a Chevy Volt.
It's a Chevy Volt. Yeah.
Yeah.
It only gets 34 miles because it was the first generation. That's in the summer.
Yeah.
But still, even with that, I driving locally, it's great. I just, especially for those affordable cars, it just makes no sense why people would not at least get a hybrid. Especially, now with gas prices where they are, it just makes so much sense economically too.
My newest car is a 2006 Ford Escape hybrid, and it's still going strong with the original battery and everything. So when the battery goes, the car will go, because I think it costs $10,000 to replace the battery or something.
Right.
So far, it's still kicking.
It's funny, the Republicans during the debate argued that EVs are not good because we have to access cobalt from African nations using slave labor. They were really reaching to be in opposition to it. I think we need to pay attention to the fact that there's a lot of innovation going on with batteries that are moving away from rare metals like cobalt or even nickel, and are looking at substances like manganese to create new kind of ion batteries. And then there are those which are not even based on the lithium ion model. So given the demand, there's going to be tremendous innovation in coming years.
Yeah, I hope that works out. I mean, I worry about lithium mines. We don't have a lot, but they're very dirty mines, and we could replace somebody like Russia, controlling oil, or Middle East oil, with some other country that happens to have the minerals that we need for this move to renewables. So it's definitely.
Yeah, China's kind of dominating the market. They've either bought up or have relationships with a lot of these African nations.
Yeah.
Doug, I'm gonna sneak out. Ann Hughes, the representative. She's here, and then she can take over from here. I just need to be at another meeting. Thank you.
Before he goes, I think everybody owes Senator Anwar a major round of applause for his tremendous work, while also taking care of people at the same time. He's my hero, and I've loved working with him this session.
I agree.
We love
Thank you,
Saud. We
Senator
love Saud.
Anwar.
Thank you. Love working with you, Jonathan and Ann. Thank you. Stay well, everyone.
Take care. So Ann, welcome.
Thank you. I just finished my convention. Thank you, Dita, for joining my convention for unanimous nominee for the 135th district. Third
Yay.
term.
Do you know who your opponent is yet?
I do.
Okay. Well, good luck. I don't want to bring any campaign strategies onto a forum like this right now, but
Right.
so tell us your take on the session. It seems like a lot got done in a short session, a lot of really good things. So what are you most proud of, and maybe what things you were very disappointed about?
Well, we knew it was going to be a short session, and word on the street was that not much was going to get passed and everything was going to get watered down. And we said, heck, we don't have time for that crap, right? So I joined the Reproductive Rights Caucus, and we passed that first in nation, Reproductive Defense Freedom Act. Joined the Climate Caucus and felt like, boy, we did not do enough on the climate crisis last several sessions, and we needed to really elevate this to the level of urgency that it deserves. And so I'm really proud of a lot of that, which it sounded like you were talking about right before I came on. I joined the Recovery for All Coalition and really demanding tax fairness and tax equity, especially now that we're facing inflation. And we have the worst economic disparity in the country. And so I'm very proud of passing an expansion of the earned income tax credit, first ever child tax credit, refundable child tax credit, property tax relief. Of course, I wanted to go further in some of but we got some major wins in there that we really mobilized. At least Jonathan can verify, at least our caucus, that some of these reforms really to how we go forward was what became a priority. We said to Sean Scanlon, just get it done. And we also, when we were looking at tax relief immediately in April 1st, we extended the gas tax, of course, cut, but also we said you got to have parity for public buses. So we made that free again through June 1st and extended that through December 1st. And that may not impact the people of my district in Easton, Weston, and Reading, but we all rely on essential healthcare workers and people that live in that work in, like where I work at Jewish Senior Services, at healthcare facilities and hospitals and rehabs. And all those folks do rely on public transportation. And I'm really proud that we made that a priority of equity, and not just for car drivers.
I just got off before this Zoom. I just got off the Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority board meeting, so I'm on their board. So well, they Doug Holcomb was instrumental in sort of laying this out, and we saw huge spikes in ridership when we made it free. And now they're collecting all this data and really looking at how to maximize the frequency and routes that really can start. I said, why can't we make this a huge opportunity for transition to public transportation, more ridership and more renewable energy? They already have a fleet of electric buses. They're ordering more, reducing our carbon emissions from transportation sector and really getting more cars off the road. How can we pivot using this crisis, quite frankly, to do that now? Because we should have done it years ago, just like Europe. Yeah. Well, GBT has 2 electric buses right now. We're ordering 3 more. I will say Doug has concerns that any attempt to go, totally electric is going to be a huge leap, whether we can even get enough electricity into our, bays and charge up those buses fast enough. So there are technical challenges still out there, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
We're moving towards that transition, and quite frankly, setting those goals doesn't mean we're penalized for not reaching it, but they are aggressive goals, and it does mean scaling up our grid and our capacity for transitioning to renewables. And so we Jonathan can again verify that we did argue about that quite a bit, about how we were going to transition what needed to be included in that transition to renewables. You know, that all didn't get decided in a short session, but we did finally set some audacious goals that meet the crisis of the moment, which, you know, is a convergence. And we're having brush fires in Middletown. Like, you know, this is not just some far away change happening. It's happening right here.
It's stunning to me that people still act like it's not happening. All you got to do is turn on the TV at night, and you know, and even here to see, you know, my basement's been flooded twice in the last 4 years, and 30 years before that, we never had a flood. So, you know, it's happening. It's all around us. So, nobody's talked, I don't think, on housing. It seems like nothing got passed on affordable housing. Is that correct?
Nothing on affordable housing. We did pass the one bill on you know, extending what do you call it, weatherproofing protections, and in paying for that type of sustainable energy audits and that kind of thing into all kinds of housing settings. There was a proposal to extend fair rent commissions outside of the towns that they're in, so that 25,000 and up have a they have a recourse if their you know, rents are being hiked you know, uncontrollably. But I'm only looking at the list of what the governor signed so far. So I can't say what passed for sure until the governor signs it. So, you know, like, and that hasn't been signed yet. But data privacy protections, that did get signed. That's really important. Data privacy and online, what is it called? It's called the online, oh yeah. Oh, we did pass it. This is what he signed in yesterday, an act establishing a hate crimes investigative unit within the Division of State Police, and requiring of a development of a reporting system, best practices, and model investigation policy for law enforcement units regarding hate crimes. We did. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but SB 20 is an act concerning the name, image, and likeness of student athletes. Our schools regularly exploit our student athletes for profit and for, you know, for their schools ranking and so forth. And this is basically restoring autonomy to those students and protecting them. But yeah, an act concerning personal data privacy and online monitoring. We did pass the CAPT Act, which allows part-time students to get financial aid for community colleges. There's a lot. We did a lot.
But getting back to your point, Doug, about the land use issues, there may not have been an appetite in an election year for us to take on something that seems to play into the political strategy of the Republicans, their whole discussion about local control.
Right.
The issues haven't gone away, but there was a sort of a pass this year. The only significant effort was in relation to development around transit-oriented development areas. I felt it was a kind of flawed bill, but I understand where it's coming from. I think we should really be emphasizing appropriate development in TOD areas. Even if this bill wasn't it, the conversation's been started. I'll be very curious, perhaps based upon the composition of the next legislature, to see where it falls in the context of priorities.
I mean, to me, it's a very hard nut to crack. You know, once you have a segregated state, you know, getting it unsegregated is a very, you know, hard thing to do. And I've seen here in Trumbull, we have passed some higher density zoning areas. And especially right now with the way real estate's going through the roof, people come in and they build a $700,000 house on, you know, a quarter or an eighth of an acre. And so it, you know, somebody's making a lot of money, some developer, but nobody's getting any more affordable housing in our town. So I'm not sure what the solution is going to be.
Other than to acknowledge we have a huge shortage of affordable housing.
Yeah.
And unless communities like yours and mine, Doug, are willing to look at the property tax, not much is going to change.
Well, that's something that I hope to really try to push, and anybody that has any ideas on how we could do that. The idea of property tax reform, when I ran for state rep in 2014, that was the issue I chose to knock on doors about, and it resonated quite well with just about everyone, and nothing, as far as I can tell, has happened since 2014. And a few months ago, I did have Alex Knopp and some other people come on and talk about this report from his group, 1,000 Friends of Connecticut. And I need to read that report in more detail, but I think property tax reform is critical. Property taxes, the problems with our property taxes are underneath so many of our other problems. Whenever you talk about affordable housing, immediately people say, oh, they're going to bring more kids into our schools. That's going to raise our property taxes. I already can't afford what I have. And so we end up, changing zoning laws to allow 1-bedroom apartments, hoping that no one could ever possibly fit a family in there, which is insane. Who doesn't want to live in a community with children? It's just crazy, the distortions that we get with this kind of zoning regulations. So I hope if anybody's got any ideas how we can get property tax reform on the legislators' radar and actually get some action on it, I'd love to hear from all of you. So we've got Terra Volpe's on here, and I want to get her to talk a little bit about gun control.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing?
I'm good. Anne, it's nice to see you. Jonathan, it's good to see you too. It's good to see all of you. And Dita is on with us. That's awesome.
I think a lot of people are at conventions tonight, so I don't
That's
know.
convention night for all multi-state reps, so.
Yes. Well, it was wonderful to see Dita this weekend at a convention.
And I love
Hopefully
your
a
new
warmer one next
haircut.
Well, I would like you all to know that I not only was thrilled to see Dita and then some. Jonathan, I knew it was going to be cold, and I got there super early both days so I could bring in my backpack full of all the things to keep me warm. So it was my good planning moment against all odds. So, but yes, Dita made a wonderful speech, and it's always a pleasure to see Dita. I'm a big Dita fan. So
Thank you. And I love your hair. Beautiful.
Thank you. I got it cut. So, okay. So I'm going to give you the rundown of what happened in legislative session with a bill that I came to you all with a while back with Leonard Jihad, and kind of gave you some of the lowdown on. So for the past 3 years, Connecticut Against Gun Violence has been trying very hard to establish a state level entity that would provide grant funding to gun violence prevention, intervention, and aftercare programs that are embedded in our most impacted Connecticut cities. And so at the beginning of session, we were sort of told probably not this year, because the legislature are still dealing with a lot of the residual pandemic stuff. However, there was a bill introduced. It was HB 5397. And there was also another bill, SB 477. Jonathan, you are going to be my backup, but I'm going to ask you to let me do this. But if I say anything wrong, you will say, hold one moment. Okay. So
Hold my beer.
Yes. So HB 5397 for CAGV was this amazing like, it was an epic bill. It was so beautiful. It had all the things, right? It had funding, it had money for grants. It had an arm that would provide sort of this advisory arm for what would be an Office of Gun Violence Prevention. It declared gun violence a public health crisis. It barred organizations that contribute to mass incarceration from getting any of this funding. And for us, it was a beautiful bill. There was another bill that got introduced. It was SB 477. Both of these bills were introduced in public health. The House bill was a single bill. It was just a bill on its own about an Office of Gun Violence Prevention and all the things. And then SB 477 was, I kind of refer to these as like container bills because they contain a lot of things. And there was a portion in that bill that talked about an entity that would be this grant making authority that would have this advisory arm. So SB 477 was the vehicle that ended up getting moved out of public health, and HB 5397 ended up not getting I don't even think they voted on it. I don't think it didn't get through. So the House bill died, but the Senate bill was still there. And so we were very happy that there was still a vehicle to move this legislation on. So then SB 477, I don't think ever came to the floor of the House or the Senate. And then that bill also died. But don't worry, because there's another vehicle that this can get done on. And so within the budget and within the implementer, what happened was the legislature ended up giving us line items in the budget and in the implementer. And it was through that mechanism that established essentially a program that will live in the Department of Public Health. And it will do the things that we would like it to do. We'll provide grants to these gun violence prevention, intervention, and aftercare organizations. It will have an advisory arm. And it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. But here's the thing about this is this took a long time to get done. And there was never this kind of a thing never existed in Connecticut before. And now that it is part of the budget, it's sort of positioned in a way that it's going to be pretty hard to not fund it going forward. And so we feel that this was a good win. We were happy. And then in addition to that, that line item and those the wording in the implementer, there were other organizations that got additional funding through ARPA, all across the state. So it was a good year for funding for gun violence prevention organizations. And although some of that money will run out over the next couple of years, again, because this is in the budget as a line item, we feel that we're in a good position for the future. I kind of think of it as like, like when you decide you're going to buy property and build a house. Well, at the beginning of this session, we didn't have property. And right now we have property and we have built the framework for the house. And so I think, we're in good shape for the future, and we will keep fighting, and we'll let you know if we need support from you all as well. How did I do?
I think you did great in describing the ins and outs of a particular bill. I'll just amplify by saying there were a lot of politics involved. And if it wasn't for the support of the governor, who had a lot of influence, obviously, in getting this line item into the implementer, it might not have happened. The House bill died because we focused on the Senate bill, which was led by Senator Moore. But even then, there was concern about bringing it out on the floor as being a long talker. The Republicans did not like it. They were going to put a lot of amendments on it that would have slowed it down. So we were able to skin the cat through other means by getting it in the implementer. I'm not sure I'm quite as confident as Terra that we can relax now and the money will be there forever. So
I never said we're going to relax.
that was the point I was going to make. I think it requires follow-up and more vigilance, and particularly talking about our successes in a way in which that we can prove out this money was well invested, so that when the ARPA funds run out, it does become a permanent part of the budget. My continuing anxiety is when ARPA funds run out, some of these programs will go with them. So we have a couple of years to really make our success story available to everybody.
Yeah, I agree, and I would say that CAGV as an organization agrees. Like I said, the property is there and the framework is there, but we need to absolutely keep building it, and we need to absolutely keep pushing that for funding, because we want it to be sustainable. So I completely agree with you, Jonathan, and don't you worry. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep swinging.
I mean, it seems like we're in a election year, and it seems like Ned Lamont is full bore on the we're cutting everybody's taxes, which is great right now when we got all this money coming in. But it worries me that that's not going to be sustainable. And at some point, we need to start talking about, how we're going to raise taxes on the wealthy or some other way to make these programs, which all sound, really invaluable. How are we going to sustain that? And that, I think, is where the real, fights are going to be, because Republicans seem like they don't want to raise taxes for anything. So I don't know how that's going to go. But and it may be a tough pivot for the governor if he's been talking about cutting everybody's taxes, and then suddenly he gets reelected and starts talking about having to raise somebody's taxes. So
I would agree that the tax cuts we have this year are really kind of gimmicky, and some of them have very short lives, as little as a year. So they are not a serious effort to address disparities in income.
Does anybody else on the call here have questions for our guests here, our experts? Anybody want to unmute themselves and ask a question?
This is Janet. I just wanted to know which was the bill that related to the tree protections that Anwar was talking about? Maybe Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Janet, I don't have the number.
Okay.
I don't have the number at the top of my head.
Okay.
I'll just point out too that Janet is an expert on messaging. She does a lot of work with, research on political messaging, and she's saying that instead of saying affordable housing, we should say accessible housing. Yeah. So I think we really need to work on our messaging in a lot of areas. And Janet's with a group called Prevail Blue, and that's pretty much their focus, I think. Republicans are expert at bumper sticker slogans. They don't solve many problems with those bumper stickers. Real solutions to problems are more complicated, and Democrats don't seem to be able to put together good messaging in a lot of cases to push back on that. So I see David Michel has joined us. David, unmute yourself and tell us what bills you are most proud of. I don't think we've touched on environmental stuff too much yet. We've talked about a lot of healthcare things and housing and other things, but what got accomplished in your mind that was really key in environmental area?
Doug, hi everyone. Hi Jonathan, hi Terra. Terra, I saw you working hard in the Capitol in the last couple of weeks, so thank you for being there. And I see Ann Hughes is here too. Just wanted to, well, of course, we passed SB 10, SB4, particularly SB4, which was merged with, if I remember if I'm not mixing my bill numbers, 5037, Maybe Jonathan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those two were merged. And as before, in the end, came out on the floor. That was kind of I think the most effective climate bill, I would say. I think we are still just, we're just starting. I think it's the beginning of many years of having to learn what we need to change more effectively and going and legislating that. I will say that there were some shenanigans, I think, that were sort of interfering with Bill's proper passage. And in my case, I could say that for sure that Commissioner Dykes was behind some of those shenanigans. She did, disagree with some senators, and some senators decided to block some bills from coming on the House floor, and etc. Anyway, it's hard to describe the entire process. And then I was actually particularly disappointed with the lack of support for passing proper environmental justice legislation. For example, if I'm a polluting entity and I decide to set up shop in an environmental justice community, which means a community that's burdened already with air pollution. For example, in my district in Stanford, I have the South End, where I have families leaving the South End because their children have COPD and asthma due to polluting entities, including constant construction, various activities, rock crushing and asphalt making, and you can keep on going. So if I'm a polluting entity and I want to set up shop in the same area, the DEEP will not turn down my permit. And that is the main issue. That is what we're trying to change. So if people are savvy with the CGA website, you can go to the bill number that was kind of cognizant to environmental justice was really, I'm sorry, I'm mixing my numbers. I'm trying to find it right now, but I think it's 5297. Yeah, and 5297 was really about the CJAC. So the word from the commissioner was, well, we have this council and they're going to make recommendations next year. And I responded, well, environmental justice is in our statute since 2008. And for many years, legislators have been attempting to change the permitting process, and it still hasn't happened. Why are we pushing it back by a year if we know and we already have language to change it? And so I kind of was disappointed with the lack of direction there. There were a lot of legislators involved. We had the chairs of the BPRC, the chair of the Progressive Caucus, which is right with us today, and Hughes. We had the chair of the Climate Caucus, Brandon Chaffee, that all tried to meet with several entities to try and get the proper language in the bill. And, just knowing that every year there are, particularly children, that's where I'm mostly focused, but it's affecting everyone, are getting respiratory disease from the lack of proper denial of permits, or going after existing permits and enabling public process and all that stuff. That's in the language. So if people go to 5297, you'll see there was an uncalled amendment, which is House LCO 3114. That is the language right there that we need. And that was, again, dismissed this year, just like last year. And Commissioner Dykes did express that she does want to have, to fix the problem. But then why are we pushing it back by a year? I said, the CGI can make decisions and help DEEP with changing the mapping of EJ communities in the state, because we're only looking at certain polluting entities, but not all of the various pollutions that exist and burden those particularly urban neighborhoods. Such as Stanford, Waterbury, New Haven, Bridgeport. So all the cities, and I did go up and speak with the governor's team about this and said, this is something that would help those communities that you actually will probably need their vote, you'll need their votes. And so how come we're not able to circumvent the commissioner on this? Why can't we pass good language? Anyway, these were some of the fights. I was very disappointed in not passing the aid in dying, and that's Jonathan's bill. And frankly, that was particularly upsetting to my wife and I personally, because we lost my father-in-law about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we lost my mother-in-law 3 days ago. And both of them went through suffering, and they were perfectly sane. And they would probably, and I'm sorry if this is maybe controversial to anyone here on the call, but we truly believe that would have been a better way. People, anyway, and witnessing it and being powerless is disturbing. And people will go to neighboring states for this. And but I certainly can talk better about the bill than Jonathan, and I think it was a well drafted, crafted bill with a lot of lines put in place to ensure that this was properly used, that this law would be properly used. So I'm sorry, Jonathan, that this bill didn't go through. I certainly was a big supporter of the bill, and so was my wife.
Thank you, David, and I want to offer my condolences. You've had a rough year. I'm sorry for your loss. We're going to try again next year. I feel a little bit like Captain Ahab and the great white whale. We're going to keep trying until we get it done.
All right, I'm very sensitive about whales too, Jonathan. So please be careful.
I know we're not going to kill any whales on this call.
Thank you. Doug, I'm happy to answer any other questions. I mean, we're all involved and more specifically on some bills, but I think we all do teamwork when it comes to the floor and in agreeing on certain bills. No.
So Aaron Good from New Haven is asking if you guys could address some of the voting and absentee ballot access legislation that passed and didn't pass.
Well, I don't think there was anything really unexpected. We got the things done we had to get done for the constitutional referendum. Maybe David recalls better than I the things that didn't happen. I was not really focused there, other than to say that Connecticut remains a state in which access to the ballot box is far easier than most other states.
Although we can only vote on one day. Well,
other than that,
yeah.
But we made a mistake of putting that in the good old Constitution,
right,
so it's
right.
going to take a while to unwind.
Right. Do we have no excuses absentee ballot for November and for the primaries? Did the governor?
Is it this year?
Yes.
Or is it next year? I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but I can pop it up.
I think if it was this year, we would have known about it by now.
Yeah.
True.
The referendum this year is on.
Oh, we do have early voting on this year. Okay.
Right,
Thank
right.
you, Aaron.
My question was, did the governor extend the no excuses absentee ballot for November? That had been a COVID thing, and I don't know if that got extended. So Aaron is saying, yes, the governor did extend that. Okay.
Thank goodness Aaron is paying attention.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So what happened? I'm reading Connecticut Mirror's kind of summary of things. Apparently Hartford is closing their trash to energy plant. And so was there any legislation around how we're going to take care of, recycling and things? It seems to me like the single stream, which I never understood. I never could understand how it made sense to have everybody throw everything together just so we could try to separate it later. And now I understand something like 70% of our waste is incinerated, whether it's recyclable or not. Did anything happen in this session about?
I'll say one
thing. Mess. Yeah.
What was that?
I'm just saying it's a mess. I'll let David take it from there.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm going to be very short. All I'll say is that no chemical recycling. Thank you.
No chemical recycling.
Yes.
I'll just amplify that, like every other state, we were caught without a plan when our ability to ship overseas went away. And I agree with you, the single stream never made sense. Our network, if you could call it that, because it was always a little bit on the decrepit side, of places where we could process materials never met the need. And the shutting of that Hartford facility, which has been a disaster for years, going on a decade or more, was perhaps inevitable, but we don't really have a plan to deal with the aftermath. To its credit, Deep has spent the last year and a half working on a plan. They put together something which in theory would put us on the right path, but we're scrambling at this point. We are really not in a good position at all. And I think we're going to be looking at trying to find places to ship it and a lot more landfill. So hopefully we don't end up burning things we shouldn't be burning. But I can't tell you we have a coherent plan in place that's going to meet the immediate need. I think the one thing we can do in the short term is return to more sensible recycling, more separation of materials, going back to the, I thought, were the good old days before single stream. It's a crisis for many municipalities. It used to be a profit center. Now it's becoming very expensive for them. We have a tremendous amount of work to do. Waste management is not an area that we have our arms wrapped around.
Yeah. Is the trash to energy plant in Bridgeport any different from the one that's closing in Hartford? Or is it better in some way, or?
None of them are great. Most of them are pretty antiquated and need significant updating. I'm not sure any of them are designed to meet the need of separation that we want to accomplish. I'd like to get more expert in this topic myself. I used to know a lot, but I have to confess I've been playing catch up.
I would just add that I was half joking when I said, no chemical recycling, but there were attempts to put some bills in that regard that would probably have helped, or quote unquote helped with the mess. But the environmental advocacy groups are very, very firmly against those, and for the right reasons. So yes, it leaves us without a plan.
I mean, it seems to make, I don't know if anything's happened at the state level, but it seems to me like we need to be focusing on the source of this stuff. There's so much waste. I mean, you buy a bottle of vitamins and it's only 25% full of vitamins. It's just, I guess they want the package to be big enough on the shelf so it gets your attention.
We did have an APR bill this year, modeled after some other states. But it obviously didn't get traction. And with some advances in getting rid of some plastic materials, some PFAS coated materials in the packaging area, but we haven't really totally addressed all of the packaging refuse that I think would be very easy as a starting point. Just dealing with shipping materials. We're all in the Amazon age. Somebody ought to be responsible for all the boxes and all the stuff they stuff inside. I think that's an easy fix, and we should focus on that.
Yeah, you get stuff in a plastic bag, but it's got a paper address sticker on it, and now you're supposed to separate those in some way. And so I'm sure nobody does that. And also, during COVID, a lot of people were getting takeout, and a lot of the restaurants were packaging it in black plastic, which, even though it's number 4 plastic, is apparently not recyclable. And so I don't know why anybody is using that stuff. But
I think the good news is I think the industry, despite the various setbacks they had the past 2 years, is starting to get with the program. They're realizing this is what consumers want. I think that we'll see a transition nationally in the next 3 or 4 years.
Well, we got about 10 minutes left. Who wants to add to the discussion here? Ann, you have anything else to add?
Sorry, I stepped away for a while, but you did talk about, the referendum for early voting. That's really important. That's on the ballot. We need everybody to understand this, like, very specifically, that we have one of the worst states for voting ballot access, and our democracy is at risk. Our democracy is so fragile that we need to get everyone engaged in voting. And that's, and affirming that right to early voting, to join the 43 other states or whatever. We're crazy that we're so far behind. And in another 2 years, we hope to have on the referendum no excuse absentee ballot voting for once and for all.
Is the wording on those ballot initiatives better than it was 8 years ago or whenever it was we last did this?
I sure hope
Couldn't be any
so.
worse.
Was that?
couldn't be any worse. But
Well,
I think you raise a good point, Doug. It has to be easily accessible to the average voter, so the Republicans can't muddy the waters, claiming there are things in there that aren't.
Right. So, all right, and
Like, just a quick thing on the environment. We did pass, I don't know if anybody mentioned it, we did pass a chlorpyrifos ban. Originally, the bill came with neonics, neonicotinoids, but that was taken out in the process before it reached the finish line. So
what was it? A ban on what?
on chlorpyrifos, that's on non-agricultural land.
like
Okay.
golf courses, chlorpyrifos, it's
State
a,
parks, yeah.
it's a
Is this-
forever toxic pesticide that is really harmful to people and to pollinators, and it gets in your water and you can never get it out.
Is that what Terra Cook-Littman was working on?
Hell to the yes.
Okay. Okay, good.
And there were a bunch of people on the bill. But,
Yeah.
Just wanna- Can I just say hi to my fellow New Fairfielder, David Stevenson? Hi, David. Don't forget to vote on Saturday.
Hi, David.
Jet.
You may have fallen asleep on us.
Somebody's asking what's happening about ranked choice voting. Essentially nothing except the conversation, I think, is being elevated, and that's a good thing.
We introduced bills in 2019. I know, well, several in the last few years. I know in 2019, Josh Elliott introduced the version to just put ranked choice voting in the state. And I know I attempted to put ranked choice voting, enabling municipalities to use ranked choice voting. But I know that hasn't moved that way. And I think there's still a lot of education needed. I think still many people still don't know what ranked choice voting is or understand it. I'm not saying this as an excuse to dismiss it, because I complain about exactly that type of dismissal with environmental justice. But there is still a need for education on ranked choice voting.
I was at Marilyn Moore's convention last night, and when we came out to the parking lot, I ran into our former registrar of voters, and I asked her several questions about voting rights and things. But she's very concerned about ranked choice voting, because even in a simple scenario, you're going to have multiple pages of ballots in order to fit everything onto a ballot. If you've got a number of, say you have 7 candidates, it's going to be, 7 columns and 7 rows to pick which one you prefer and rank them all. And she doesn't really understand how we're going to do that. And also being on the Connecticut Citizens Audit group with Luther Weeks, he has severe concerns about how one would go about auditing an election like that. It's already difficult to recount, votes when they're just simple up and down votes. And now to have to go through something that, in real time, you're eliminating the lowest person and then recalculating and eliminating the next person, recalculating, that looks like it would be a huge nightmare, which I don't know if everybody that's pushing this fully understands.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So couple of things. First of all, you should have Jonathan Perlow, if you haven't already,
Right.
come on and do a presentation. And secondly, one of the things that happened this weekend in the convention was that the Democratic platform was established. And within that Democratic platform with regard to voting rights, it was said that ranked choice voting should be studied. And so I think that's a fair beginning.
I think there's a lot of study needed, and I think we need to really include registrar of voters in the conversation so they can understand this. And the other thing, even is early voting, I think is problematic. If we're a lot of people think that it's inevitable that we're gonna have, no excuses absentee ballots. And the question then is, why do we necessarily need early voting? And if you've got a town that only has 1 polling place currently, which some towns are small enough, that's the case, they have to hire moderators and people to run the polls, 1 day a year or several days if they have local elections. But now you're going to require them to hire those people to be there for 7 days, 14 days? And where's the money going to come from to support that? If your Trumbull has 7 polling places, so adding, one more for 2 weeks is not going to, multiply the cost by 7, but in a small town, it could be prohibitive. We already have trouble finding people for election day, so.
Right. But to be fair, Doug, one of the basic things is like we only allow 1 day, and we have the most restrictive absentee ballot use in the country.
Right, I
So if
realize
we
that.
extended that to the weekend before, something modest, that yes, it would be an issue, but like a Sunday before, as well as
That would be huge, and it would be a lot less expensive. I think Josh Elliott was calling for 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. I think that's problematic from a cost standpoint. But
Doug, I might have missed a piece of that, but I know in Stanford, we were talking about asking to defer the count because of the absentee ballots coming too late. Was that what you guys were just on?
Well, no, we didn't bring up, that's another issue. All I was saying is that a lot of these things have issues that really need to be studied.
Yeah.
The concern I've been hearing is that if you've got a small town that has 1 polling place, and now you're going to require, them to have a polling place open for 2 weeks. Now they just went up, their cost just went up by 14 times. It's not the same if you've got a big city with multiple polling places. It doesn't go up, it doesn't scale up like that. So we really need to think about that. And if we have no excuses absentee ballots, do we need that many days of extra voting? Maybe I think weekend voting and things like that. I mean, I'd love to see us go to a national holiday for election day. But certainly a weekend voting would be great.
I introduced that bill for that in 2019. Didn't go too far.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that don't want everybody to vote. So
Yeah. I mean, I guess what's frustrating is that there's been this bill to study ranked choice voting that's been kind of floating around for a long time, and it's not kind of making its way through the legislature. And I'm on the phone, I'm talking. And that doesn't seem like good, because maybe, there is an argument for ranked choice voting and we need to understand it, but not being able to do the study so we can better understand it seems a little silly. So I would hope that, and now that it's in the platform, I hope that it becomes a priority to at least take a fair look at it. And the other thing I would say is, look, I mean, literally voting is the bedrock of our democracy, and we should be funding it well.
Exactly. We shouldn't skimp on that.
Let's not skimp on the bedrock of democracy.
Terra, how about approaching the chairs of GAE and asking for an informational hearing on ranked choice voting? Because informational hearings will bring other legislators.
yeah.
And,
Funny, I recently heard somebody say that our right to vote is the second most important right we have, only to the right of free speech. And of course, the right to vote is not a right in law. We don't have a right to vote in the United States. We need that, but it is not a right. So, and it's getting, infringed on, even though it's not a right. It's getting reduced all over the country. So.
And Doug, with the entire electoral system, I always ask myself, how do we do 2 presidential election turns in France in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge difference in how we run our elections.
Yes.
And maybe we should look more deeply into that.
Yes, you're right.
Because it's crazy. We do 2 turns. We have 2 turns for the presidential election.
Right.
It happens in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
2 weeks apart.
You're talking about one election and then a runoff in 2 weeks. Is that
Exactly. So you have the first turn is when you each party, and there's like 12, 13 parties, each party has their candidate that they endorsed.
right?
And then all of those candidates, plus maybe a couple of petitioning candidates, that's rare, but there's some, and all of them are voted on in the first turn. And then it's the 2 of all those, the 15 candidates, the 2 top ones end up in the second turn. I bet you, I mean, I'm ready to bet that if we had 2 turns, Trump might not have been president, just like Le Pen did not end up president.
Right. I'm gonna close by raising up one of Janet Epstein's comments over here is we've heard a lot about some really great legislation that was accomplished. A lot of it people didn't think we would accomplish, and we accomplished it in a short session. And how do we plan on making the state aware that all of this really good stuff happened? And any of our legislators here that are left, any
We'll
thoughts
take it
on
door
that?
to door. We'll take it door to door combat and amplifying that. Get some billboards. Let's go. Let's celebrate what we passed.
Yeah. All right. Any last comments before we go? Any last questions? I appreciate the conversation. I wish.
Hi,
we
David
got-
Stevenson.
Sure. What?
I'm saying hi to David.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's frozen again. I can't say hello to him. I'm trying so hard. David, vote on Saturday.
Thank you all for showing up for democracy.
Bonjour David, il faut aller voter samedi. Il faut voter samedi. I know he speaks French.
Ah.
Merci.
All right. Good luck, everybody, and have a nice summer. Hopefully, warm weather is coming, and we'll see you again soon. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.